It's like, this is the time, and you have your announcements at 7:30 in 3 languages, and then we were made to play games and do bingo, but it was fascinating. I mean, I'm really glad we went to Russia and we did.
So it was a social experiment in many ways.
Yeah.
You never know who you're going to end up with in this.
Yeah, and we met, they actually along the rivers, and they will be doing really badly now with no tourism, as they had basically about the same as Dunedin, so maybe 200,000 visitors a year, and it was all along between St. Petersburg and Moscow, so the teachers would come out and they'd be in their traditional costumes singing to make some money. You know, and the one day when we couldn't get to where we were going, we went to a real Russian village, and you know, it was terrible. Drunken people at 10 o'clock, and it was just overgrown and ramshackle, but we got to go in a Soviet submarines. That was pretty cool. Yeah, you just like, you know, when my mother had lived through the Cold War and couldn't believe that she was in Moscow and Red Square, wow. It was just amazing. Yeah.
Scary too, though, the submarine.
Yeah, it was, because you just like, how could people live in a place like this?
Yeah, I know, it's from land.
Yeah. Well, they made it out.
Are we good to go?
Yep.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Dear people of Tourism 101, especially those are here, but also hello to everyone on Zoom. We are very lucky today because we've got with us Sophie Barker. Sophie has a tremendous history in tourism in Dunedin, where she will be able to share her insights from various perspectives as someone living in a destination, being involved with several businesses, tourism and non-tourism as well, and most recently experiences as a councillor and also mayoral candidate. Go Sophie.
I'm
not going to waste any of more time myself. I'd much rather hear from you, Sophie, so thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Now it finishes at 9:50, is that correct? No, okay, just going to get my timing right. Kia ora everybody, ko Sophie Barker aho. Hopefully I'm going to inspire you a little bit about a career in tourism, which is where I grew up, and my love of this sphere of, I guess, career. So this is me as a baby in 1967, so you can all be doing some quick calculations as to how old I am. Don't worry, 55. And my mum and my granny and granddad. So my parents were, my mum was 24 years old and my dad was a little bit older, and they went on holiday in the South Island, and they were actually freedom campers. My mother hates being reminded that she was a freedom camper, and they came upon the castle, which was in a pretty bad state of repair, and sort of joked about buying it, and then eventually actually ended up buying it. So my mum woke up on her 25th birthday, very pregnant with me, in this leaky old castle, and has spent her entire life, she's 80 now, restoring the castle. So there's some more baby pictures. There's my mum there, and myself and my brother, and this is the state of the kitchen in the castle. Pretty ramshackle, and my mother was turning out batches of scones for all of the tourists. It was very basic, and we were busy 2 weeks of the year, so we lived the rest of the time in debt. We made money. It was between Christmas and New Year when everybody in New Zealand went on holidays, and it was before there was international tourism, so we were busy trying to get as much money in as they could. They'd have all the farmers' wives would come and work with us, and we'd work pretty hard just to make the money to carry us through. We had no money at the time, so my mum and dad were pretty much do-it-yourself handyman people. Dad used to do all the electricity, and Mum was doing the gardening and the painting. And has anyone here been to the castle? You've been, yeah. So you can see what it looks like now, which is very glamorous and beautiful. But when my parents first bought it, there'd been sheep kept in the ballroom. There's a beautiful spiral staircase inside, and that was actually all painted brown. So my poor old mum was stripping that back and actually sat in the stripper while heavily pregnant. So it was a pretty tough time, a lot of hard work. And it used to rain harder inside than outside. You can see the state of the vinery there. So I don't know if anyone's ever been and made a wish in the wishing well. I just warn you to be careful. My mum met some people who'd come to the castle on their honeymoon, and they'd wished for twins, and they'd got twins. So we should have a warning. Wishes may come true. But you can kind of see the state of the castle there, all of the rust around it. This is our swimming pool with a marble fountain from Pisa, so maybe we were a little bit privileged in those days as well, but it was a fun place to grow up in. Also rather cold and scary. There, I could tell you some ghost stories, and maybe I will at the end if we've got time, but yeah, a lot of, I guess, tragedy and scandal had gone on in the castle. So it was built in 1871 and belonged to William Larnach, who was a merchant banker. So he started his career on the goldfields of Australia and had a tent, a dog and a gun, and that was his first bank. And then he married very well to Eliza, and she was a French heiress, and she came with a dowry of £85,000, hugely rich. And he decided to move to Dunedin, because this was where the gold rush was now, and then decided to build a big flash house like all of the big flash people were building in those days. So it took, it was actually a volcanic cone shaped like this, and they put wooden pegs into the rock and then poured seawater onto the pegs to make the pegs expand, and that was how they provided the solid base for the castle. And then it took 200 workmen 3 years just to build the outside of the castle, and a further 12 years was spent doing all the embellishments inside. And then Larnach had some family troubles. In the end, his third wife ran off with his second son because they were of a similar age, and Larnach shot himself in Parliament Building. So that was a huge suicide and scandal. And then the castle went through very many different owners as well. So it was used as a hospital for shell-shocked soldiers, a lunatic asylum, a nun's retreat. During the Second World War, I think they had soldiers billeted there as well. So it just kind of spiraled downwards until my parents came along and took it on. People said to my mother, "You're mad, it can't be done," you know, taking on a place like this. And now we get people saying, "Oh, I nearly bought it," but they didn't. So after growing up at the castle and the cold and the damp and the chilblains, I was sent to boarding school because I had pretty minimal social skills, having grown up wild in the countryside. So I don't know if you recognise any of that. I was at Columba College just up the hill, so I weekly boarded, and then on the weekends I went back and worked in the castle. So I vacuumed the 3,000 square feet of, is it 3,000? That's what the ballroom is. So vacuuming, dusting, making scones. I'm not making it sound like tourism's a great career right now, but I'm working my way towards doing better. It was one of those weekend jobs that you had to try and make a little bit of pocket money. And at the top there is my little school uniform. We were opening the stables for accommodation. So the only way that we could get money to do up the stables was we signed away our souls, I guess, to, I don't know if you know the Contiki tours, you know, the 18 to 35-year-old buses full of people that would come and get very drunk and party. But anyway, we did that for quite a number of years and looked after them, which was a lot of late nights and a lot of stress. But anyway, we got the stables done up, and if you go and visit the castle nowadays, you can see the beautiful stables with their Marseille tiles. And that's coming out function that we had from our school. So we were a little bit rosy-cheeked. And then I came to university at Otago, where I studied commerce and finally graduated with economics. I wasn't a very good student because I'd been locked up in boarding school, and Columba girls are a little bit renowned. Once you get out of boarding school, you know, just going for it. So I was also working full-time. So when I was about 18 years old, I was taught how to go and do sales calls with travel agents. So I had the briefcase and the photo album and used to go around cold calling on people in Auckland and Christchurch, etc., to try and get business to come to the castle. So that was pretty tough as well. And that's me working on Christmas Day, where I'd left the zip on and flooded the kitchen. So that was a really happy Christmas day. And we used to host groups for dinner as well, so I was coordinating my outfit with the dog because things like that were kind of amusing. It was my office when I was doing all of the marketing, and then at the top right hand side is me and my just delicious little apron with the lacy bits, and we were also forced to wear little lace hats as well because we were trying to channel the whole Victorian experience. So that's what I did in the weekends when I was at university. And also we would dress up in Victorian costume a lot of the time because we were sort of channeling the whole Victorian experience. It's me taking tours around. I did that from about 13 years old, which is pretty tough when you're a bit of an introvert and you have to take tours around of some people who kept telling you to speak up and enunciate. And that's my mother and my brother. My mum, on her 50th birthday, we had a gold and silver ball. I was also at the time running functions because we have a 3,000 square foot ballroom. So we would be doing a couple of weddings a week. We could seat a couple of hundred people in the ballroom. So it was a lot of work just to get the cash in, basically. We were still mainly domestic tourists, but the international tourists were starting to come in. So it was still that really seasonal kind of November through to March when we were busy, and winter was just dead quiet. So that's when we did all the renovations. So we were getting money in and doing the renovations there. And then this is what I spent the 90s doing. So we started to get into the Australian market because that was a market that was up and coming at the time. We figured out it was pretty close and Australians loved New Zealand. So I would get that old briefcase out and go and cold call on travel agents there and try and get those bus tours to come through to Dunedin and put Dunedin on the map, because at the time it was sort of that golden route, which is Auckland, Rotorua, Queenstown, and Dunedin was not really relevant. So we spent a lot of time marketing Dunedin as the heritage capital of New Zealand, which I still springs off my tongue as it did yesterday at council. And then we started going, this was before Tourism Dunedin was there, but in 1993 we went up to Singapore with Tourism New Zealand. So you can see I was in a lovely Victorian outfit. It was so tight and it was so sweaty. The things you do for your country. And then we would be served enormous banquets with things like sea slug on the menu, which you would have to happily eat and pretend was extremely delicious. So they were really long days. People think that this looks amazingly glamorous, but what we were doing was getting on a plane, lots of planes from Dunedin, getting on a bus, having a lecture about what we're supposed to be doing the next day, getting up and doing either trade shows or doing, like 90 15-minute appointments over 3 days, or you'd be dealing with 10 different countries. So it was actually really hard work, but I learnt such a lot from a lot of the people that we were working with as well, was how to pitch to different nationalities. You can't really see there, but there's a brick phone. We thought it was amazing when we finally first got cell phones, and so we had to take a picture of new technology. It was quite heavy to carry. What else? Oh, and we got to meet a lot of celebrities as well. I've got a picture of a pretty big celebrity coming up. And then this is just showing some of the road shows that we went on. Tourism New Zealand is still doing it, would organise road shows for the key operators to go on. So we would, again, get on the planes and do the meetings with people, and also go to trade shows. Like we would go to trade shows in Singapore and Malaysia, which was a lot of standing around in the booth and leaping on people. And the best thing I guess I learnt was when we would go, oh, these people are lovely and they're coming to New Zealand. And the Tourism New Zealand guy would go, conversions. It's all about conversions, which was trying to change people from going to Australia. We go, it's so big, it's much better in New Zealand, and get them to come over. And this is when we were away with Kira Tours, which hopefully they're still around. COVID's been pretty devastating to the whole industry, and it was quite pioneering at the time. We were breaking into new markets, so we were going to Korea, which was a new market for New Zealand, and just sort of, I guess, a bit of a beachhead in there. So that was really interesting, being some of the first people to go there, up to Taiwan, Hong Kong. I think that's a sea slug dinner, or it might have been something else, and more dressing up in Victorian costume. And then in 2000, I was lucky enough to go to university in Hawaii. They had an executive development and tourism course, which was an intense 3 weeks. Let's learn all about tourism, and they had amazing teachers. So I was very, very privileged to go there. We did spend a little bit of time drinking Mai Tais, but I did learn a lot about the strategic focus on tourism. It was an amazing course. So hopefully they're still doing it at the University of Manoa. And then it's my family there, where we won a Westpac Tourism Award, which was pretty exciting. And they also turned over, around that time, I think we turned over our first $1 million. So that was pretty exciting to actually get the business to a stage where it was making a little bit of a profit because all of the money just went straight back into the castle, buying furniture back, doing the gardens, not into us. So I was in charge of the marketing and the operations, and I guess that I hadn't really been trained for anything like that. There were no tourism courses at university at that time, and I had my economics degree, but I couldn't go anywhere else because my family was a very small business, and my dad had left, and we had to spend 10 years paying him out. So we worked our butts off for those 10 years to try and make some money and get visitors through, and we built some accommodation, etc. So I was doing the operations management, which was managing, we had 65 staff, a lot of staff, and also doing the marketing, which was, I guess we finally got websites at some stage. We didn't have any social media in those days, so it was still brochures and it was still going and talking to travel agents. But we did extremely well, and in the end we were the top paid attraction in Dunedin with over 100,000 visitors, and we targeted the markets, like the Australian market that came all year round, the Chinese market, and especially the Taiwanese market, because they really did like to spend money with us, which was great. We used to give them a dish, what was it? Chicken stuffed with haggis, which is one of our inventions. Sounds terrible, you're wincing there, but the Scottish thing was really popular with our international visitors. When you were trying to find your point of difference as Dunedin as a city, it was the heritage city, and it was also the Scottish city, so we would do a lot of haggis ceremonies, and I don't know if anyone here has ever seen a haggis ceremony, but lots of big pipes, and then we had to eat a lot of haggis, so I got to like it in the end. So I think actually next month maybe is St Andrew's Day, so they do an event down in the Octagon, so if you're curious about what haggis tastes like, head on down there. Yeah, so we were the top attraction in Dunedin, and we made the peninsula a destination because people kind of thought we were in the middle of nowhere, and they wouldn't come out from town because we were, they thought we were half an hour out from town, but we managed to just get those minutes down and so a short scenic drive from town, and managed to get a lot of the buses through and then become an iconic attraction. So there was a lot of working with media because we had no money really to spend on marketing. A lot of it was done through publicity and through building those media relationships. And then of course all the money went into the restoring the castle to be what it is today, and that was our mission, was actually to restore the castle and create this amazing garden, because my mum's quite a gardener. That's you can vaguely see her there, and me when I was little in the garden. That's the rock garden there. So the garden is now a garden of international significance, one of the top 6 gardens in New Zealand. So that was adding onto the product as well, because it's very hard when you've got an historic building to try and create a product. It's awful to talk about a castle or an albatross, etc. as a product, but that's actually what it is, and then we create the story around the product and give people things to do, because we couldn't make enough money just through having people come through on the tours, so we would have the add-ons, we would have the lunches or the morning tea. So I was very good at making scones with Devonshire tea, which people thought that they should have in a castle, and high teas, and then we would do groups for lunches, groups for dinners. So that's when we do a lot of the haggis ceremonies, because what we were doing was competing for night stays, as I said about the Auckland, Rotorua, Queenstown. We used to get Japanese tours who would leave Japan and fly into Christchurch, and then get on a bus and come on the bus down to Dunedin and come out and have dinner with us, and they would literally be falling asleep in their soup because they had a 5-night itinerary for New Zealand. So we had fought very hard to get Dunedin on the map and differentiate ourselves so that we could host those visitors and get those numbers through. And we also did the functions in the evening, so we would do a lot of we'd do the weddings, and we do chase conferences as well, because they didn't really mind what they paid for wine and food. So we really liked them. They were really easy. And then we also built accommodation in a lodge, which was the old cowbyre. So it has, lucky old cowbyre, had amazing views down the Otago Peninsula. So I remember when we were, with my stage 1 accounting, signing the loan papers for all of this money, which was a little bit scary, but I'd got my spreadsheet and done the numbers, and we did actually pay off the loan a lot faster, and that actually gave us a really saleable, marketable product, because when you're dealing with travel agents, they want 20 to 30% commission, so you need a good chunky product so that they would be able to sell that and get the money that they wanted and needed, and then the castle was kind of an adjunct to that, and we did dinners for them as well. So we were an extremely complicated and busy business that was trying just to keep up and get into the seasons, I guess, was trying to get ourselves through winter, and trying to make jobs for our staff as well, because most of the time the jobs would be part-time jobs. I'm sure that everyone here, my daughter works at Jitsu part-time at minimum wage. So trying to make those jobs more valuable so we could pay people more, and also that we could employ people year-round, because otherwise we'd be getting seasonal staff in. So that was part of the work that we did to create a tourism attraction that would last and pay for itself, and also give back to conservation. So my daughter does not know, she's at university here. I have not got a picture of what she looks like nowadays, but anyway, baby photo. She'd be thrilled if she knew that I was showing her baby photos to you all. This is Charlotte, and the dog is Fern. So we would have to dress up every year, because we would send out our kitschy little Christmas card to everybody from the Barker family, because part of what mattered was selling the story of the Larnachs and their scandal, and then the Barker family and their hard work, because that's what people would connect with. And when we're talking about marketing and tourism, it's about getting people in their heart and getting them with the story, and then bringing them in the door and getting their money spent, because you have to be quite focused on actually getting money and making a business work. When we were sort of first starting off with the castle, a lot of people in heritage would go, think that we're a bit, because we were so focused on making money. And then eventually they all came to us on how to make money. We would also do film sets as well. So we had a Korean film crew. Was it that one? Yeah, it was that one. And they ended up staying for a week because of the weather. But anyway, we made them, I'd learnt from some of my friends in tourism, got cash up front. So we would actually be we'd go down and talk to them through the translator and get a brown paper bag with $5,000 in it. And we'd sit there and count it out. And the translator was, Mr. Such and Such, his honour is insulted because you asked for cash up front. Anyway, they left owing TVNZ about $40,000 because TVNZ had not got cash up front. So I learnt a very valuable lesson that business isn't business unless you got the money. So that's what made me pretty tough about that. So anyway, families being families, it was a little bit of a challenge, and I ended up leaving to go on to better things, to turn into a pirate. This is when I went to work for the Economic Development Unit. So I bought my very battered copy of the Dunedin Visitor Strategy. So I'd been on the steering group for the strategy. So this was put together in 2007, 2008, and I have read a lot of visitor strategies, and I think this is a really good one. And they were trying to advertise for people to do it and couldn't get anyone. And I'm like, if you're desperate, I'll do it. And so I applied for the job properly and got the job and got to go and work in council. And because I'd had the business experience, the destination experience, I'd had some governance roles as well, with Dunedin Host, with the Tourism Industry Association, which is now called something else. I got to go and work in economic development, which was an amazing experience. I spent the first year utterly terrified because I'd come from a very different background, a very entrepreneurial business kind of background, and council was just full of reports, and hierarchy. So it was quite challenging to get into something like that. But I had a strategy to deliver. So I spent a lot of time, because it was destination management, talking about toilets and freedom camping signage, because what I wanted was we'd got the marketing part of it, which is about the promise, come to Dunedin, it'll be amazing. And my job was actually to make sure that it was amazing. So when people came down the highway, that they would find signs that were going to direct them to the places that they needed to go to, that they could had good toilets, that we worked with the community boards to make sure that the communities were welcoming. And I also worked with the tourism operators. There are a lot of part-time people that think that tourism's a really easy industry to get into, buy a bus, do some tours, but you actually need to know how to run a business. So I worked a lot with trying to get people to do business plans because you needed to know how much money was going to come in, especially with cruise, because everybody got super excited. Cruise doubled in 5 years, so it went from just a few cruise ships coming in to, it was well over 100, I think, and we ended up with, I think, nearly 50 operators who'd all bought buses, etc., all fighting over quite a small amount of people, actually, a couple of hundred people. Because off cruises, the cruise ships, you would have about 50% that were going on the tours, like the train and on the bus tours out to the castle, etc., etc. And then you'd have another, 30 to 40% that would come into town on the shuttles and go shopping. And then there are about 200 people, about 10%, I'm talking like a Princess Cruise, which has got 2,000 people on it, that hadn't made a decision. So we got a lot of operators fighting over those 200 people. And when I started looking after them, they'd be out, some people would sleep in their buses overnight and then come out with cardboard with postcards on and then wonder why they weren't getting the business. So it was quite a challenge to work people through about, you need a website, you need to provide commission, and you need to make it easy for people to book. So the whole lot of talk about what booking engines people needed and the actual machinations of running a business, because it's not just as easy as getting a bus and getting people on it. So that was part of what I did, and we also tried to get people to sign up to Qualmark, which is the Quality Assurance Program. Really good for people. I mean, we were all just like, oh, it's $1,000, such a lot of money. But you do actually learn some of those business attributes as well. I'm just trying to put about what else I had to do that. So yes, the council was a huge learning experience, but it was really great to actually be inside council because I was dealing with transportation and roads, so I learnt a lot about what went on in council and had a really great team. So we were in the economic development unit, we had specialists in Māori, IT, our coordinator, and also the regional business partner network. So we were able to, I called our job the connectors, so we were able to connect people with funding and with training, etc., and also do projects like the excuse me, economic development strategy. So it's all like quite strategic, but it was a really cool team, and I was very, very lucky to spend so many years in council delivering this, and tourism grew and grew at the time as well, so it was just taking off on a huge round. So my job was looking after those tourism operators and the destination management as well, so I got to know Dunedin quite well. But it ended up that I spent a huge amount of time on cruise because cruise had just gone crazy and we weren't actually ready as a city. Like the shops weren't opening. Sounds silly, but they weren't opening when the people coming in, they weren't accepting foreign currency, they weren't posting, so we had to do a cruise operator book. And we also had to try and make sure that we were all telling the same story about Dunedin. So I produced all the things that Dunedin was famous for, the firsts and onlys, what the population was, so we'd all agree on that, and we were all telling the same story. And then we trained about 700 people as well on customer service and how to greet people, all of that kind of stuff. So it was just about lifting the professionalism of the industry. Our goal was to become the premier cruise destination, and we got to number 2, but number 1 of course was Milford Sound, and how do you compete with that? We actually worked quite closely with the university as well. James Henry, who was in the Department of Marketing, really helped with writing our cruise action plan. So we had a plan and we had a cruise action group, and we actually achieved all of that. So it's pretty exciting that cruise ships are coming back, and hopefully everything will be ready for them. So I just talked a little bit about the different things that I did within the visitor strategy, if anybody wants to have a look at it, it's got some really, it's a bit old now I guess, it's got some really interesting information in it. So there was the destination management, the product development, and that was trying to get hotels into the city as well, and then trying to help operators think about what markets were coming in, because we had, you know, the Australian market, Chinese market, Japanese market, Americans, people from the UK, and they all had different interests and different things. So we would talk to operators about how can your product change for that market, and that was super important when the Chinese market started getting really big, because we were not really China ready. There was a lot of work done by central government on trying to train people to ni hao and understand how you could change your menus without totally changing the experience, and give people a good experience as well, because they were a little taken aback, like places like Dunedin, it seemed really empty to them, that we didn't have any nightlife, that our shops weren't very good, that we weren't taking different currencies, etc., etc. So that was quite interesting as well, and I worked on the China product development quite a lot, because I've been to China a few times and understood the culture and also how people could change. But then people also had to choose what markets they were in as well, and what money they needed to make. We'll go back to the money. What money they needed to make as well, because some of the Chinese tours were not paying very much, so you did have to make decisions about, is this a valuable market for us, and are we making the money per head that we need to make, or are we paying the visitors to come and see us, which sometimes is challenging. And the operator support, I've talked a little bit about how I worked with the businesses, so that was upskilling the businesses and connecting them with central government. We put a lot of money into training, so trying to get people, we just talk about working on your business rather than in your business, and it's all very easy just to wake up every day and turn the handle, but you have to understand where you're going as well. And then the destination marketing, this was done by Tourism Dunedin, so they lived out a house and did the marketing for the city, but my role was to manage the relationship between the council, which was funding it for 1.1 million, and Tourism Dunedin, which was delivering what the council was paying for. So it was like that sort of relationship. So we had a statement of intent, which was like, oh, we're going to deliver this for you, and service level agreements, which was how we were measuring how many tourists were coming in, how many, if they were spending 1.8 visitor nights, etc., etc. Because as council, you need to make sure that if you're investing, you're getting a return on your investment. So the tourism industry pre-COVID was bringing in over $700 million into GDP. So it's a huge industry, and it was employing over 3,000 people, and I think we had basically around 2 million visitors into the city. So that's counting cruise, domestic, international, etc. So it's really huge when you think of a city of 130,000, 34,000 we are now, hosting those 2 million visitors that you might not think they're there, but they're everywhere, and it's people who are coming to visit you, you're visiting friends and relations, it's the cruise ship passengers, the people coming in for conferences, etc. So I was managing that relationship with the destination management, which was a little challenging, and eventually a decision was made to bring them back into council. So now there's Enterprise Dunedin, which is responsible for the destination management and the destination marketing as well. So it's interesting. I don't know if you've been studying regional tourism organisations or not.
We do an introduction as part of
Yeah.
this course, and then we follow up in second year.
Oh, you have to wait till next year, but I feel like there's a 7-year itch that it changes every 7 years, that it's in council, it's out of council, because it's a really hard thing to measure about how is your marketing working. So it's if you keep studying it, you'll probably find it quite interesting. And then I've talked a little bit about the cruise action plan as well, and delivering that, because it's a huge market, but there are a lot of discussions about how valuable it is to the city. I managed to get the cruise park for the shuttles in the middle of the Octagon, because I'm like, I want them off that bus and spending within 5 minutes. And there's a lot of businesses that have built up around the Octagon for those cruise ship visitors, so they'll be very happy to see them back. And then I was headhunted, so very fortunate to be headhunted, because council was a little bit challenging when you work in a hierarchical organisation. I'm trying to think how tactfully you put it. Anyway, quite stressful. And I was very lucky to get shoulder tapped to go and work for the Otago Peninsula Trust. So this manages the Royal Albatross Centre. So there's me with an albatross. That was very, very huge privilege to actually go out onto the Pukekura onto Taiaroa Head, and I got to feed a baby albatross. And when I say baby albatross, they're like 10 kilos, so they're not that small. So the ranger would hold the mouth open and you would shove the fish in, or the big syringe full of electrolytes, etc., and pray that you were not going to be the one that killed the baby albatross. And you can see here we made a life-size albatross cake. There was a thing on national radio that you could bake a cake that looked like a critter. So we made a 3 metre, and you can imagine 3 metres is pretty big, 3 metre cake. Oh, and there I am, fake albatross, not real albatross. And then being on One News as well. So my role there was as marketing manager and to consolidate all of the trust attractions. So they had the Royal Albatross Centre, Fort Taiaroa Disappearing Gun, Glenfalloch Garden, Blue Penguins Pukekura Joint Venture, Fletcher House. So there were quite a lot of things. They all had their own brochures and their own websites, and my role was to bring it in and consolidate it all and market it so we could get more visitors and get more people through the door to spend more money. So we ended up, I think it might be on the next slide, having over 200,000 people come through the doors to all of the attractions. And my role was to sell, I used to sell Dunedin as the heritage capital, and now I sold it as the wildlife capital of New Zealand, because the albatross are truly iconic. It is the only place in the world where people can come and see an albatross colony on a mainland. So I grabbed, I don't think I've got a picture there, the idea of the chicks, which is what you can see now, and we also got, which was really useful, a live cam, and this was a joint venture between DOC and the Royal Albatross Centre as well. So you can dial up and go Royal Cam Albatross. And I'm trying to think, actually, it might have fledged, so maybe you might not see anything. But anyway, the chicks hatch in around January, and you can actually watch this chick grow up. And I call it the gateway drug to conservation, because people fall in love with this chick. We'd had millions of views from all over the world. It was just an amazing thing. And then there would be a naming contest, so it became quite famous, and it was featured a lot on the news, and people found it really good for their mental health. They were even using it in the neurosurgery here. So when people had to have awake brain surgery, they were playing the Royal Albatross webcam, which was quite soothing to them. Except we did have one incident, which is just awful, which is when the mother albatross killed the baby albatross on screen. So you can imagine you needed a crisis management plan for that. Unfortunately, the baby albatross was choking, and the mother thought that it was in distress, I guess, and kind of grabbed it. But there was a lot of blood and a lot of phone calls, and that's when you're learning about how you have to, when you've got this huge fan base and you've built up this love for this albatross, and it's all very beautiful, and isn't nature wonderful, that nature can be cruel. And then we had to deal with a lot of broken hearts and write our crisis management plan in case something happened again, because wildlife is wildlife, and it's quite stressful as well. What else can I tell you about the wildlife? So I also did the Wildlife Care Code when I was on the board of Dunedin Host, and one of the concerns, and I guess this goes back to what I learned about destination management, was that people were not behaving well around wildlife. So people did not know not to pick up shags, to keep away from penguins and not scare them, from sea lions, etc. So we did a wildlife care code, which was to try and make sure that people understood what they how they should be around wildlife. So that was an important thing to do. I'm just trying to see if I've got anything else there. Red-billed gulls. I can see we've got a couple of minutes. So I was actually on the BBC talking about red-billed gulls, and you will have all seen the seagulls around, and they're actually more endangered than the albatross, and not many people appreciate this. And at Pukekura we have the only mainland colony not in decline. So that was why I ended up being a spokesperson for the misunderstood red-billed gull and going on the BBC, which is utterly terrifying. And had to do it, you know, on something like Zoom live, which was really scary. And then my background just kept falling off the wall because I was actually in a cupboard because there was so much echo around the room that I planned to do it in. So you have to be quite, what's the word? I can't think of it right now. But you have to make a lot of solutions happen when you end up on international television talking about some of these things. Because the albatross are world famous, we would end up talking to all sorts of people and also hosting celebrities. So you'll recognise this gentleman who came to Dunedin, and we hosted him out to the albatross, and he also came out and fed penguins with us, so that was pretty cool. So we had to keep the visit all really quiet from all of the team that were working there until like Pascal was just outside and we're like, yeah, Ed Sheeran's just about to arrive, and everyone just went, oh, crazy. So it was a little challenging to deal with, but he had wanted to get away from everyone and had snuck in and come and saw the albatross. And I also had to organise a picnic for him on a private beach, so I had to go onto the internet and see what food he liked. So I go to the supermarket and buy food that Ed Sheeran likes, made him a picnic, and then also sneakily got a selfie with him. So that was pretty cool. So we also have quite a connection with the royal family. Princess Anne opened the Albatross Centre, and he's now King Charles. There's a lovely picture of King Charles out seeing the albatross, and apparently he asks after the albatross. We'll be expecting a visit from him anytime soon. So then I did something not a little insane. I guess I was really annoyed about how Dunedin was being marketed and how we weren't following our strategies and our plans. So I thought that I kind of needed to do something about it. So in 2019, I stood for council and fortunately got in. So this is the current council. Obviously, that's me, short and pink with an albatross brooch. And council itself, puts together things like visitor strategies. We had, the thing that was driving me nuts, we had about 8 strategies, and it seemed to me like none of them were being carried out, like the visitor strategy, the destination plan. What was it, 2018? I think it was my tipping point where we'd all given a lot of hours and we really wanted tourism to go forward, but we were actually 31 out of 31 RTOs for performance. You can't get any worse than that. So that was one of my reasons, was to get in and try and politically change some of the focus of the city, and hopefully, because I love tourism obviously, get tourism back to where I thought it needed to be. So council was a lot different to what I thought it would be. I had worked at council for 7 years, so I used to say things when I was out on the election trail like, oh, hit the ground running because I know everything, but it was completely and utterly overwhelming, and I don't think I really said anything for 6 months because it was full on fast, and there's so much more than you think it would be. Like, we spent a lot of time talking about rubbish dumps, Smooth Hill, roads, cars, parking, lots of time about parking, cycling, etc., and talking about what sort of city that we would like it to be. But there's a whole lot of stuff that we also do about road closures, the submissions to government. So it's actually quite consuming as well. It's been a really interesting role, and I'm obviously standing for mayor because I'm a bit challenged by some of the behaviour, etc. You're coming into an institution that's quite male-dominated, shall we say. You can see there's 5 females in there and a lot of people who've been on council for a long time. So in my opinion, it needs change. My daughter's 19 years old, and I want her to not be telling me that Dunedin's boring, and to create a much better and more exciting future for our city. So we have a few strategies that we talk about as well. So there's a destination management plan, which is going on at the moment, and I encourage you to go on the Angus and Associates website, because they're actually trying to sign up people to do a lot of research, and they're looking for young people to do research, to be researched for that. So this is about community acceptance of tourism, about where we think tourism for Dunedin should go in the future. So everyone's opinions are really, really valued, and the council's putting, or actually the government's funding it, a lot of money into this, because one of the important things, pre-COVID, tourism was just going a little bit crazy. It was just huge growth, and we were having issues with too many people in too many places. So we have this little pause because of COVID to think about where we want tourism to go. So the destination management plan is being done at the moment. So really good to get involved with that and try and think about where we should go. You know, freedom camping. Do we want to be a world leader in ecotourism? How many visitors do we think we want? Do we want to spread them out? I'm trying to think of all the questions. Are we the heritage capital? You know, what is it that we have to offer? And also, what are the things that we need to change in Dunedin for visitors? So there's a few things to think about. Still working on another cruise action plan. Also Dunedin Railways future. So Dunedin Railways was about to be mothballed, actually about to be sold when COVID came in, because it's removed from us. The council has some council-controlled organisations which own the railways, and they're like, it's bird tucker. And we're like, no, it's a really important asset to the city. So we're thinking about how on earth we make this business work. There's a lot of money that needs to go into the historic railway. And then also people are talking about maybe a cycle trail that connects up through Middlemarch. So that's something to think about, especially when you put our zero carbon targets in there. How do we balance all of these things to make sure that we have a great future? The Heritage Action Plan, something drives me crazy. 2007 is the date of that strategy, so it's a little bit old. And we see some of the buildings in the city not looking that great, so we need to make sure that if we've got all this amazing gifted heritage that we're doing something about it. And also the environment plan as well. When I worked down at the albatross, I was very, very conscious about, you could see the effects of global warming. We were raising money to buy water for sprinklers to help the albatross chicks get through summer because it's too hot and they die. They get fly straight and die. And the eggs, it gets up to 40 degrees and the eggs cook. They don't cook anymore because we have incubators that the Department of Conservation put them in. But there's some huge problems out there. And the seagulls, you can see the population being impacted by predators, by the sea heating up, and there's not enough food for them. And then I would spend a lot of time down cleaning up beaches as well, where we get kilos of people's rubbish. So totally into the environment and what we need to do to make sure that tourism contributes to this, because all of those lovely visitors with all of their lovely money come in and do things like help us restore our heritage buildings, Ulverston, Larnach Castle, the railways, and then also through the Royal Albatross Centre means that there's money going into conservation. So the money comes into the Royal Albatross Centre and then goes to DOC to look after the albatross, and other bird species benefit from that as well. And this is my happy place. I volunteer about once a week for Blue Penguins Pukakura, which is a joint venture between the Otago Peninsula Trust and the Kurako Karatai whānau. So this is something that's really dear to me. The Kurako Karatai whānau actually descended from the headland, and this is their special place. So this is a penguin reserve just down underneath the albatross colony. So I get to wear high vis. Who doesn't like wearing high vis? And hang out with penguins. They think that I'm doing them a favour because I go and help host visitors, which I love doing. And I'm like, I get to see penguins. So that's all of the money goes back into revegetating the area. So lots and lots of trees being planted, and also the penguin care as well. So that's where we hosted Ed Sheeran and we were feeding penguins. So we've built a lot of penguin boxes because usually they like to live in burrows, but the burrows can be subject to the sand falling down, etc., etc. So we've got nice little, doing better than Kiwi build, nice little purpose-built houses for the penguins, and they have been flourishing. They were growing at around 13% per year. So that's a really great example of a whānau-based project which has taken a beach which previously maybe had 30 pairs of penguins, and now there's over 250 pairs of penguins, and it's shut off in the evenings because people were coming and driving down, running over penguins and picking up penguins and standing on burrows, etc. So this project has actually saved a lot of the penguins and turned their precarious existence into something quite special. So I think that's about all that I've got to say, but I would love to encourage you to consider tourism as a career. It's been an amazing career for me, and I guess I was lucky enough to be born in a castle and have all of those experiences. But whatever you do, tourism just provides you with some amazing experiences. I love meeting people. I love the conservation and heritage outcomes, and also when you're in tourism you get to do a lot of things for free or discounted from our friends in the tourism industry, plus the travel that I've had to do in my marketing career as well. So hope you stick with tourism.
Thank you so much, Sophie. What questions have you got?
No questions? Oh, and I need to say to you, my daughter told me that I have to tell you to vote. Please vote. Don't really care if you vote for me, but it would be nice. But please do get out and vote. 18 to 24-year-olds are 50% less likely to vote than older people. So when you looked at that picture of the council, when you looked at the representation, it was a little older. So there is a university student, the lovely Jet Grzynsky, who is standing for mayor and for council. So I'm going to say please vote for Jet. I'd love to see him on council because we need a youth voice there as well. Yeah, now that I told you who to vote for. Yeah, sure.
In a perfect world, if you had your way, what would tourism in Dunedin look like?
There's an interesting thing where people talk about what is high value tourism. I guess that what we loved were our quality visitors who really interacted with us, and we got that in our lodge because the lodge was pitched at the 4-star, and we would get, I called them well-educated gold card holders because we didn't have platinum cards back in those days, but they actually wanted to talk to us. You know, they weren't just coming in and taking a picture and leaving. They wanted to engage with us, and I think that tourism that gives back to the city as well, that gives back to the community. So this is creating employment, fixing our heritage buildings, contributing to our conservation, and the sort of tourism that I want to see is not the sort of tourism where there's free-for-alls on the beaches and stuff, because that's just really not good for the wildlife. So yeah, I guess I sound like it's more controlled, but because we have these assets and this wildlife, we have to control the visitor numbers, otherwise it won't be there for the future. And I tell people now, and I'm going to tell you, go out and look for yellow-eyed penguins, because maybe they won't be here in 20 years. It's that bad. Mm. Shouldn't end on that note. It's positive.
In that case, anything else from you? In that case, I'll ask one last question.
Yeah.
Not long ago, in our third-year course, where we looked at tourism product development, we ended up having a conversation about whether Dunedin was really the wildlife capital or the heritage architecture capital. Can you solve this for us?
I can solve it for you. I call it the heritage and wildlife capital, but over 50% of people come to Dunedin because of the heritage. So wildlife is its own niche, and it's a really good high value niche, but it is the key differentiating factor. Yeah, I can share the stat with you somewhere. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Asking question for us, Sophie. What is your
What's
body
amazing?
look like? Can I buy
What's
your
amazing?
coffee?
Thank you. Bye bye. Well, I hadn't really, because of my whole eye thing, I hadn't really had time to put anything together. You got some slides.
Oh, hugely informative, and I really like how you're the sort of different angles on working in.
Bye bye.
See you soon. Bye.
Yeah.
You
Bye
know,
bye. I guess I'm lucky.
Working for council, working for your own business, doing the Tourism New Zealand trade shows.
Yeah.
So much work.
Yeah, and I guess I've been really, really fortunate to have all of those different experiences, which makes, yeah. I forget how much I know, but then you don't want to be a know-it-all. You know, you would just say, my mum used to say, oh, that won't work. And she would be right, because she's had enough life experience to know, because I just go, yes, I will do it anyway.
By the way, doesn't your mum look like Sandra Bullock?
Oh, you think so?
Look at your first slide where she's sitting on a chair with probably a baby on her
Yeah,
lap.
that would be me.
Totally Sandra Bullock.
Oh, I'll tell her. She won't even know who Sandra, because now she looks a bit like the Queen.
Well, maybe that's just age, but on those early photos, totally.
Yeah. Oh, well, I'll tell her that she looked like someone who's quite glamorous. It's all these pictures of her in her miniskirt, you know.